Good morning, church. As Heather said, my name is Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at Palo Alto First Christian Church. And before we dive in, I have a joke for us this morning. Little Philip was spending the weekend with his grandmother after a particularly trying week in Sunday school. And his grandmother decided to take him to the park on Saturday morning. It had been snowing all night and everything was beautiful. His grandmother commented, "Doesn't it look like an artist painted this scenery? Did you know that God painted this just for you?" "Yes," replied Philip, "God did it, and he did it left-handed." This confused his grandmother, so she asked him, "What makes you say that God did this left-handed?" "Well," said Philip, "we learned at Sunday school last week that Jesus sits on God's right hand." There you go. Heather laughed. There you go. As long as I get one chuckle, I'm good. Oh, and a clap. Oh, my goodness. We are in week 2 of our Blueprints series. In this series, we are looking to answer questions that usually begin with, "How do I?" So many questions in our life start with those few words of, how do I pray? How do I connect with God? How do I connect with other people? And sometimes it's easy for us to Google search that, but sometimes that's not the same answer that we're looking for. Sometimes it's not interpersonal. It's not exactly in the form beyond just, here is information that you need to do. And so in this series, our hope is that information is absorbed, but beyond that, that information is also applied to life. The reality is church matters more when you're applying what you've learned. I'll say that again. Church matters more when you're applying what you've heard. Because the reality is, if I'm coming to church with an expectation that I'm going to take something and I'm going to do it, I'm going to have a different excitement and energy level. I'm going to be like, I am here because I need something from church today. I'm here because I need to hear from God. I need to hear because I need to hear God through other people. When I was in college, the classes that I took, you could tell the classes that I enjoyed and I cared about because you would see my notes are extensively long. And then there are some classes where it's like math class. Like, I don't really care about math. No offense to all the math lovers in the world. But math is like, notes are bare minimum, as little as I need to understand. And sometimes that's how we come to church. All I'm coming for is the bare minimum and not, I need all of this. We should be coming with the question in our hearts, Jesus, what do you have for me today? Whether I'm coming in person, whether I'm joining online, Jesus, what do you have for me today? Because I want to hear you through the message, through communion, through worship, and through the other people that I'm going to come into contact with. That was all freebie stuff. Now we'll actually talk about what I wanted to talk about. In order for us to go back to the basics, we have to pull out the blueprints. Blueprints, as Heather shared last week, are before you even begin a project, you need to show this is what eventually we are going to have. This is what our end goal is. Before we even lay the foundation, we have the beginning, the blueprints. So we're going to pull out our blueprints today and answer the question, how do I be a part of the family? How do I be a part of God's family? Heather last week talked about how do I reconnect? And this is taking that reconnection a step further of not only how do I connect, but how do I be one of us? One of us. One of us. Proximity to people does not mean that you're close to those people. Just because Heather sits one pew away from you doesn't mean I'm Heather's best friend because she sits in front of me when we're at church. Just because I'm close to someone physically doesn't mean we're close relationally. And when we're in a family, it's easy for us when we're living in the same building as someone to equate proximity to relational closeness. Oh, that's my brother. We share a room together. Oh, my mom and dad are over there. My son, my daughter. We're in the same house, so we're close. But it's different when we are relationally close. A question I have for all of us is, what defines you in a family? I am a husband. a father, a son, a brother, a son-in-law, a brother-in-law, an uncle, a cousin, a nephew, and probably more that I've missed. So many different things to explain this is who Mark is in his family. But all of those titles have expectations. As an uncle, I'm expected to pour into the lives of my nieces and nephews, but not too much. I'm not mom, I'm not dad. So from a distance, I support my brother-in-law, my sisters-in-law. As a son, there's expectations of obeying, of serving, of taking care of my parents. As a husband, as a father, I have responsibilities for those in my own house. Being a part of a family requires action on my part. So let's dive into God's word this morning. Let's go to the blueprint maker himself and see what we need to know. We're going to start in Luke chapter 10 this morning, starting in verse 25. It'll be on the screen, but that's where we'll be if you'd like to read along. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" Jesus replied, "and how do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all of your strength, and with all of your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." In God's family, we follow the rules. If we could get this right, the family of God would be so much healthier. If all of us were 100% all in 100% of the time, I'm loving Jesus with everything, and I'm loving my neighbor as myself 100% of the time, church would be utopia. Everyone would be at church. It wouldn't just be like, oh, those Christians go to church. Everyone would be here because it would be the place that people want to be. But reality, we are human. We don't always follow the rules. It's hard for us to love 100% of the time. But Jesus kept things simple and arguably difficult when he summarized that the most important rule for us to follow is to love God. Sometimes we hear this verse and I don't want to say we roll our eyes, but we're like, well, there it is again. Love God with everything. But then we forget, have I mastered that yet? Nope. Didn't love God with everything yesterday, trying to do it today. So it's a good reminder for me each and every single day. It sounds so simple, and yet it's something that we are going to work on our entire lives. And we don't just stop there because we're called to love our neighbor as well. In our Wednesday night group, we were talking about how knowing how much God loves us and how much Jesus was willing to sacrifice himself on the cross empowers me to love others well, to recognize the value that I have as a human being, a child of God, loved by God, stirs something in me of, I can love you too. I don't care what you're going through. I can love you too. And as Jesus ends with, do this and you will live, I have to imagine that it's not just like, do this and you will live forever, but you'll truly live. Sometimes we go through life and we are alive, but we're not living. We're stagnant. We're just sort of going along from day to day to day. And Jesus says, when you're loving God with everything and when you're loving other people, that's when true life happens. I'm sure you can remember days when you helped a friend move, or you were there for someone when they needed someone else, and you went to bed that night and you were like, today was a good day. I felt like what I did today mattered. I truly lived today. All of the laws that God gave the Israelites in the Old Testament were both to point forward to the fact that we need Jesus, but were also so that society could be whole. So that society could be the best that it could possibly be. All these things about making sure that people are fair and equal, making sure that justice is served, is so that we can all be living life well together. So a question I have for all of us is, How is your love doing? I feel like I ask this pretty frequently, but I think it's a good question for us to check our love. How is my love doing for my family, for my church family, for strangers that I meet? How much love am I putting out into the world? Not just like a love you, man, but like a true self-sacrificial love that we can only find in Jesus. We're going to jump ahead to the book of Acts, chapter 2, starting in verse 42. Jesus has died on the cross. He's risen from the dead. He's ascended into heaven, and now his disciples are left to figure out, how do we do life in a Jesus isn't physically here world? And so the disciples preached to the world, to all the people in Jerusalem, and 3,000 people in one day say yes to Jesus. And we pick up here as they're trying to figure out, how do we do life together? So in Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs that were performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, and praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. A few chapters later, in chapter 4, we continue on that all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything that they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. We learned from the early church that in God's family, we do life together. This isn't just I check in on Sunday mornings and I see people every now and then. This is I am committed to my church family. We had a great conversation about this passage in our Wednesday morning Bible study, and the reality that this isn't just like, the early church were these pious people that 24/7, all they did was just listen to the disciples' teachings, and it was like this little commune of all they did was sing praises and read the Bible. These were real life people. These were people that had jobs. There's crying babies in church. There's people that I have to go and get my donkey because it's out feeding in the field right now. They got life going on. But in and amongst that life, surrounding all of these church activities, or all the life activities, they're making sure to come together. 3,000 people committed to saying, I am going to be in this family. And even though they had all of this stuff going on, they increased their efforts to include one another in their lives. Come over to my house to eat. If you have a need, please let us know so that we can meet it. Let's tell other people about this Jesus and this new life that we have. They start out as 3,000 plus people, but then they expand and they grow. And yes, they got issues like any church, any group of people, but the heart and the community did not change. And I love how it mentions that by God's grace, needs were met immediately. People had a need and they're like, we need to meet that need. We need to go out of our way to make sure so-and-so is included. In this passage, we see the importance of small groups, of people getting together. And we have small groups on Sunday mornings and on Wednesdays, but our heart's desire is that everyone in our church is connected outside of Sunday. In a small group, you have people checking in with you, reminding you, hey, we're going to meet together, and following up on prayer requests. We love our prayer time every Sunday morning, but it's so much greater when it's like, hey, it's not just a pastor praying for me, but it's someone else that comes to our church. And I know that I'm on the mind and hearts of other people that are in my small group. And if you're like, hey, that time doesn't really work for me, talk to Pastor Heather and I. I'm pretty sure we're going to make it work. If we're like, hey, we need a Thursday small group, we need a Monday small group, let's try and figure out how we can do more life together. We've been meeting with people in our church, trying to reconnect after this last year and a half that's been crazy, reconnecting after having Pastor Dan step down, and just trying to, how can we do more and more life together? And if maybe a few months ago you heard me say, hey, we're going to meet with everyone, and you're like, it's been 2 months. I haven't met with Pastor Mark yet. Thank you for your patience. We are still meeting with people every single week. You are on my mind. You are on my list. Don't worry. You will be seen if you want to. If you don't want to see me, I'm not going to kick your door down. But as we've been meeting, it's been so good to hear how people came to this church, how people have seen the seasons change, and how people have seen God's faithfulness and his goodness in this house. I was on the phone this week with Meg, and she was sharing her heart of, she's like, I feel bad because with COVID right now, we're not comfortable with being inside, especially with our newborn son. But I don't want people to think that we're not like coming to church anymore just because you don't see us on a Sunday. And I was like, Meg, just because you're not here on a Sunday doesn't mean you're not part of the family. Doesn't mean that it's like, oh, it's been 2 weeks since we've seen Meg. Cross her name off the list. No, church is more than just Sunday. And if you're like, oh, I haven't been in a while, and that's okay. But even with that being okay, we do encourage those, as Pastor Heather shared last week, of like, hey, we do still want you to be here. Praise the Lord for Zoom. Praise the Lord for YouTube and live streaming and all of the things. Imagine if right now was happening 20 years ago. What would church look like? But we have all of these opportunities so that we can be in person, so that we can be online, and praise the Lord for all of it and everything in between. So how are you doing life together? As you look at your week, as you look at your life, how are you including the church family in that life? Are you inviting people to your house? Are you calling people on the phone and saying, how can I pray for you? Are you getting groceries? What are you doing to include other people and to have life together? Our last passage that we're going to go to is in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. It'll be on the screen, but I will also be reading it. Matthew 25, starting in verse 31. Jesus is teaching his disciples, and he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as shepherds separate the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right hand, and he will put the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Then he'll say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are accursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Sometimes Jesus brings it back to being a little bit more serious of what the stakes are for followers of Jesus. And sometimes it can look a little dire. But we see here that in God's family, we go out of our way. We look at this passage and we recognize, we see this in light of God's grace and mercy. That the same God that said, hey, I'm serious about how much we need to do for other people. This isn't a suggestion, this is a requirement that you go out of your way to serve. Is the same God that said, I do not want any to perish, and I give more people time so that all might be saved. And so we hold the judgment of God in the same hand as the righteousness and the grace and the mercy of God. And we say, God, I'm going to be obedient, and I'm not going to worry about not being one of the people on the left because I want to be one on the right. The reality is, in God's family, we serve other people as we love with everything, as we do life together. The natural outpouring of those two things is, what can I do for you? As we look at our blueprint, it's really quite simple. Do something. Give a cup of water, visit someone, pray, meet a physical need. I would love for us at this church to have a board of needs. On one side is, here's all the needs: a ride, some food, help with a payment. And on the other side is a list of names of people saying, I am willing to meet a need. Just as we saw in the Acts passage of people that were willing to sell things so that other needs might be met. I hope that we as a church family can be the need meters. But it's hard to say I need help. It's hard to be honest and vulnerable and say, I have a need, can someone help me fill it? So I encourage all of us today, if you have a need, please reach out. Don't feel like the worst thing that we can say is no, we don't have something that can meet the need. You're not going to receive judgment or have someone say that shouldn't be a need. So please feel that you can ask in this place. But church, the legitimately scary part about this passage is that one of the worst things that we can do is absolutely nothing. And it's so easy for us to do nothing because it's comfortable to do nothing. It's comfortable to say someone else has got it. It's comfortable for us to just look the other way, for us to not show up when we know that person has a need, so I'm just going to walk over here and ignore them and someone else will take care of it. But one of the worst things we can do is to do nothing. So let's be the do something people. Let's be the people that say, yes, Jesus, I want to do something today. And even to have that phrase in our minds of I want to do something is an act of saying, Jesus, you tell me what the something is. I'm ready for whatever. I'm ready so that if it's a big need, if it's a little need, I can do something. I love that even the things that Jesus lists, they're big things. Like, hey, I needed food. I needed a place to stay, and you invited me into your personal space. And then there's little things of, you just gave me a cup of water. It doesn't matter who we are, how young or old, or how much money we have in our bank account, we can give a cup of water. We can do a little thing. We can do a big thing. So what is a something that you need to do? Maybe God's already been tugging on your heart of, I need to do something. But I pray that this week that you have that as your prayer. Because when we talk about how do I be a part of the family, it's a dual thing of I'm putting myself out there. Family is real. And sometimes that takes the risk of putting yourself out there of like, here I am, I want to be part of the family. And then there's also the part of those of us in the family saying, yes, you are a part of the family. And so we always have this dual responsibility of, am I putting myself out there? Am I making sure that those that are putting themselves out there are being received? So that I know, as Pastor Heather shared last week, I said hi to the new person. I invited someone to lunch after church. I called someone on the phone. I'm doing my part to make sure family feels like family. It can't just be, I'm not saying that it always is, but it can't just be Heather and I, because as we look at our to-do list, sometimes things bounce off the to-do list and it gets pushed back. But when we're all going to the need board and seeing what we all need to do together, that's when the church comes alive. That's when we look like Acts chapter 2 and Jesus is adding people daily. Jesus said specifically about money that when we're entrusted with little and we can be honest and we can show that, hey, I am trustworthy with this, that we can be entrusted with much. And I think that principle applies not just to our financial resources, but to everything in life. Am I good with my one friend? Here's more friends. Am I good with the responsibilities in my job? Yes, here's a promotion. I'm not saying it's one-to-one, but I am saying that when we are living faithfully, Jesus sees that and we are added upon. So the things that we've talked about today, in God's family, we follow the rules. So how is your love doing? In God's family, we do life together. So how are you doing life together? And in God's family, we go out of our way. So what's something that you need to do? I pray that as we go out from this place this week, that all of those questions are stirring in our heart, that the Lord is speaking to us about all of these things. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to enter into a time of communion. If the worship team can come up to the front, and also Heather and Evan are going to come and pass out communion for us. If you'll join me in prayer. Jesus, I thank you, God, for your word. We jumped around a little bit today, Lord, but I think that each of those passages were important for us to see and to hear how it's important for us to be a part of the family, Lord. And it's important for us who are in the family to include everyone. And Jesus, as we enter into this in time of communion, it is a reminder that we are all welcome, that we are all included, that there is no exclusion at the table. So Jesus, I thank you for your word this morning. I pray that it goes deep down into our hearts. I pray that we stir on these things, Lord, that we go back to your word throughout the week, God, and we see the more that you have for us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.